March 28, 1979. At 4 o'clock in the morning, alarms began sounding inside a nuclear power plant in central Pennsylvania. Within hours, rumors spread that America was facing its first nuclear catastrophe. Television stations interrupted regular programming. Parents rushed to gather their children. Families packed their cars, unsure if they would be returning home. The governor advised pregnant women and young children living near the plant to evacuate. No one knew exactly how bad the situation was. For days, the country watched and waited. This wasn't Chernobyl, it wasn't Hiroshima. But what happened inside 3 Mile Island changed the future of nuclear power in America forever. This is the story of the accident that almost destroyed the public's trust in one of humanity's greatest technological achievements. To understand why 3 Mile Island became one of the most significant nuclear accidents in American history, we first have to understand America in the 1970s. The country was in the middle of an energy crisis. Oil shortages had led to long lines at gas stations. Electricity demand was rising every year. America needed a new source of power. To many scientists, engineers, and politicians, the answer was nuclear energy. Unlike coal-fired power plants, nuclear reactors could generate enormous amounts of electricity without burning fossil fuels. Many believed they represented the future. Power companies announced plans to build hundreds of nuclear reactors across the United States. 3 Mile Island was one of them. Located on a small island in the Susquehanna River just outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the station was home to 2 nuclear reactors. Unit 1 began producing electricity in 1974. Unit 2, the reactor at the center of this story, had only been operating for a few months. It was considered one of the newest and most advanced nuclear power plants in the country. To the people who lived nearby, it wasn't a symbol of danger. It was simply part of the landscape, a place that provided electricity, jobs, and a glimpse into what many believed was the future of American energy. No one imagined that in just a few months, 3 Mile Island would become one of the most recognizable names in the history of nuclear power. March 28, 1979. Just after 4 a.m., what began as a routine morning shift quickly turned into one of the most significant accidents in the history of American nuclear power. Ironically, it didn't begin with an explosion, it didn't begin with a fire, and it didn't begin inside the reactor itself. Instead, it started with something that seemed almost insignificant: a malfunction in the plant's secondary cooling system. The secondary system is responsible for carrying heat away from the reactor by producing steam that drives massive turbines to generate electricity. When that system failed, heat could no longer be removed as efficiently as it should have been. The reactor immediately responded exactly as it was designed to. Control rods were automatically inserted into the reactor core, shutting down the nuclear chain reaction in just seconds. To anyone watching from the control room, it looked like the safety systems had done their job, but the real danger was only beginning. The reactor had shut down. But contrary to what many people believe, shutting down a nuclear reactor doesn't immediately stop it from producing heat. Even after the nuclear chain reaction ends, the radioactive fuel continues releasing enormous amounts of heat through a process known as decay heat. Without constant cooling, temperatures inside the reactor can continue to rise for hours. To prevent dangerous pressure from building inside the reactor, a pilot-operated relief valve automatically opened. This was completely normal. Once the pressure dropped, the valve was supposed to close, but it didn't. The valve became mechanically stuck open, and that's where everything began to unravel. Inside the control room, operators received a signal indicating that the valve had been commanded to close, but the instrument didn't actually tell them whether the valve had physically closed. Those are two very different things. Unknown to the operators, thousands of gallons of cooling water were slowly escaping through the open valve. The reactor was quietly losing the very thing keeping it cool. The operators believed there was too much water inside the reactor. In reality, the exact opposite was happening. Following the procedures they had been trained to use, they reduced the flow of emergency cooling water. It was a decision made in good faith, but it was based on incomplete and misleading information. As coolant levels continued to fall, parts of the reactor core became exposed. Temperatures climbed to thousands of degrees. Roughly half of the reactor's nuclear fuel became severely damaged during what would later be classified as a partial core meltdown. The accident wasn't caused by a single catastrophic failure. It was the result of equipment problems, confusing instrument readings, human decisions, and design flaws, all occurring within a matter of hours. It became a textbook example of what engineers call a cascade failure, a series of small problems that, when combined, create a much larger disaster. While engineers fought to stabilize the reactor inside the plant, a different kind of crisis was unfolding outside. Information was scarce. Rumors spread faster than facts. Local officials struggled to understand the situation. Television networks interrupted their regular programming with breaking news. For millions of Americans, this was the first time they had ever heard the words nuclear meltdown. People didn't know what a partial meltdown meant. They didn't know how much radiation had been released, and they didn't know whether the situation was getting better or worse. As uncertainty grew, so did fear. Some families packed their belongings and left voluntarily. Schools and businesses faced growing concern. On March 30th, Pennsylvania Governor Dick Thornburgh recommended that pregnant women and preschool-age children living within approximately 5 miles of the plant evacuate as a precaution. That recommendation became one of the defining images of the crisis. Across the country, newspaper headlines warned of radiation. Television reporters stood outside the plant, delivering updates with little confirmed information. Every new rumor fueled another wave of public anxiety. Although later investigations found that the amount of radiation released to the public was relatively small, few people knew that at the time. In a crisis, uncertainty can be just as powerful as the event itself. For many Americans, 3 Mile Island wasn't just a nuclear accident, it was a crisis of confidence. Confidence in technology, confidence in government, and confidence in the idea that nuclear power was completely under control. When people hear the words nuclear accident, most immediately think of Chernobyl. It's an understandable comparison. Both accidents involved damaged reactor cores, both made international headlines, and both forever changed public opinion about nuclear power. But that's where the similarities largely end. At 3 Mile Island, the reactor experienced a partial core meltdown. The nuclear fuel became severely damaged, but one critical system continued to do exactly what it had been designed to do: the containment building. Surrounding the reactor was an enormous steel-lined, reinforced concrete structure designed to trap radioactive material if something went wrong. Despite the damage inside the reactor, that containment structure remained intact. It acted as the final barrier between the damaged reactor and the outside world. 7 years later, in 1986, a very different disaster unfolded at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in what is now Ukraine. During a poorly planned safety test, operators disabled several safety systems. Combined with serious flaws in the reactor's design, the reactor became unstable. It exploded. Moments later, a graphite fire sent massive amounts of radioactive material high into the atmosphere. Unlike 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl's reactor did not have a robust containment building capable of trapping that radioactive material. The consequences were catastrophic. Large areas of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia became contaminated. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to relocate. The surrounding exclusion zone remains largely uninhabited to this day. 3 Mile Island proved that serious accidents could happen. Chernobyl showed the world what could happen when multiple layers of protection failed all at once. The comparison between the two disasters helped reshape nuclear safety around the world, not because they were the same, but because they were profoundly different. More than 4 decades have passed since the accident at 3 Mile Island. The damaged reactor has long since been cleaned up, the headlines have faded, and for many Americans, the event has become little more than a chapter in a history book. But the lessons of 3 Mile Island are far from over. Today, the world once again finds itself debating the future of nuclear power. As countries search for reliable sources of low-carbon energy, many experts argue that nuclear power could play a critical role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and meeting growing electricity demands. Supporters point to modern reactor designs, improved safety systems, and decades of operational experience. Critics point to 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima as reminders that even rare failures can have lasting consequences. Those debates continue today. But perhaps the most important legacy of 3 Mile Island isn't about nuclear power at all. It's about how complex systems fail. The accident demonstrated that disasters are rarely caused by one catastrophic mistake. Instead, they often emerge from a chain of small failures, equipment malfunctions, confusing information, human decisions made under pressure, and systems that weren't designed to handle the unexpected. Engineers study 3 Mile Island. Airline safety experts study it. Hospital systems study similar principles. Even cybersecurity professionals and financial institutions use the same ideas when designing systems meant to prevent cascading failures. The lesson is universal. Technology alone cannot guarantee safety. Clear communication matters, good training matters, strong leadership matters, and perhaps most importantly, learning from small mistakes before they become large ones matters. 3 Mile Island changed the way America thought about nuclear power, but its greatest legacy may be something even bigger. It reminded us that progress is never just about building more powerful technology. It's about building systems that people can trust. Because when trust is lost, it can take generations to earn it back. Every story has an origin. Some change history, others change how we see the future. 3 Mile Island did both. This has been Origin Files. Like and subscribe for new videos.